Welcome back to Left, Labor Education for today. This is the weekly rundown where we talk about the top stories from the world of work this week. In our first story, we're going to feature the Red Cup Rebellion, which took place Thursday, November 16th. So what exactly is the Red Cup Rebellion? So this was a day of action that was organized by Starbucks Workers United, the union representing Starbucks employees going through organization processes across the country. And in 2022, last year, the union coordinated the inaugural Red Cup Rebellion, whereby workers at mostly unionized locations chose to participate in a day of action where employees would walk off the job, participate in a work stoppage or strike to call attention to unfair working conditions and alleged union busting. Specifically with respect to the unfair working conditions, the union targeted Red Cup Day as the day when Starbucks gives out free reusable red cups to its customers and introduces a series of holiday drinks for the winter season. And this promotion and promotions like it tend to drive more and more customers to Starbucks locations where employees say that they are consistently understaffed, which results in angry customers, which results in really negative employee experience, and according to these employees, a negative experience overall for the company. This year, the Red Cup Rebellion was also intended to draw attention to those union busting activities that Starbucks Workers United always points to. As of October 16th, so last month, the National Labor Relations Board reported that the organization, the board, has issued 105 complaints covering 369 unfair labor practice charges against the company, which includes a series of allegations regarding Starbucks' refusal to bargain or engage in collective bargaining with Starbucks Workers United. Starbucks, however, not only denies these charges, but says that the union is the one responsible for not meeting and engaging in good faith collective bargaining for the last 5 months now. On Starbucks' website called One Starbucks, they released a press release called Red Cup Real Talk. And in this press release, they say that those participating in protests and other demonstration activities are calling on Starbucks to, quote, come back to the bargaining table so partners have a, quote, voice in their scheduling, workplace pay, and staffing. Starbucks goes on to say that unfortunately the union's rhetoric misses the mark despite repeated weekly efforts to schedule bargaining sessions for stores represented by Workers United. Their representatives haven't shown up or agreed to meet to progress negotiations for any store in more than 5 months. Basically, Starbucks is passing the blame to Workers United for the lack of progress on collective bargaining negotiations. They even say that they have reached tentative agreements with 2 locations in North America not represented by Workers United, and that they're making progress on a third in Pennsylvania, also not represented by Workers United, but rather a different union. Starbucks also takes the opportunity to emphasize some of the improvements that it's made across its locations for both union and non-union workers, saying that they've invested more than 20% of its yearly profits back into the partner experience in the form of wage increases, training, and new equipment. Next up on the UAW front, I wanted to provide an update on the ratification process for the tentative agreements that reflects historic increases in wages, cost of living adjustments, and other contract improvements. Last week, there were some jitters, especially among General Motors employees, that the agreements were not met with as much approval as the UAW leadership had hoped and expected. For example, on Thursday of this past week, it was reported that only 55% of voting members at General Motors were supportive of ratification. However, by the end of the week, it was announced that all 3 auto manufacturers have seen ratification support and therefore will be able to implement those tentative agreements in the coming weeks and months. And meanwhile, another non-union automaker joined Toyota and Honda this week, announcing wage increases for its non-union U.S. factory workers. And that was Hyundai, which announced a 25% wage increase by the year 2028. And in testimony before Congress this week, UAW President Shawn Fain referred to Hyundai's increase as the UAW bump, which he says stands for "You Are Welcome." And speaking of congressional testimony, Fain's comments were only a small part of an otherwise exciting day on the Senate floor. The session was organized by the U.S. Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, also referred to as the HELP Committee. And this particular committee hearing was titled Standing Up Against Corporate Greed, How Unions Are Improving the Lives of Working Families. The hearing was led by Chairperson Bernie Sanders, a Democratic senator from Vermont, who's notoriously supportive of union organizing. However, Sanders' voice was offset by ranking member Bill Cassidy, a senator from Louisiana and a Republican, offering a different set of viewpoints. Democrats predominantly voiced support for unions in this hearing and the need to make it easier for workers to organize in the U.S. going forward. They referenced the PRO Act, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, which is currently stuck on the Senate floor, as even though it had received support from the House of Representatives. And Cassidy and fellow Republicans are predominantly arguing that the resurgence in the labor movement, as well as historic contractual wins by UPS, UAW, and other organizations, signals that there's no need for additional labor legislation, such as the PRO Act, that unions and collective bargaining are working as intended. And together, the committee presented 5 witnesses, one of whom was Teamster General President Sean O'Brien, who we've talked about multiple times before on this channel. He was the one responsible for negotiating the contract on behalf of UPS workers. And in a period of questioning, things got heated between O'Brien and Oklahoma Senator Mark Mullen. These two already had a history that had started in a previous congressional hearing and had continued onto social media. And Mullen reintroduced this controversy by quoting O'Brien's tweets. Here's a clip of the exchange.
In fact, you tweeted at me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. And let me read what the last one said. It said, greedy CEO who pretends like he's self-made. What a clown. Fraud. Always has been, always will be. Quit the tough guy act in these Senate hearings. You know where to find me. Any place, anytime, cowboy. Sir, this is a time, this is a place. If you want to run your mouth, we can be 2 consenting adults. We can finish it here.
Okay, that's fine. Perfect.
You want to do it now?
I'd love to do it right now.
Well, stand your butt up then.
You stand your butt up.
Oh, hold on.
Big
Oh,
guy.
oh, stop it.
Is that your solution every
Hold it. No, sit down.
That's why you're a clown.
Sit down.
Look at you.
You know, you're a United States Senator. Sit down.
Active.
Oh, okay.
Sit down, please.
In a separate update also related to the Senate Help Committee, ranking member Bill Cassidy sent a letter this week to the chair of the National Labor Relations Board, Lauren McFerrin, in reference to the recently released but long-awaited final rule on the joint employer standard. The National Labor Relations Board had telegraphed over a year ago that it would be updating the rule on joint employer in the U.S., which would make it easier for employees to claim joint employment both by the employer that signs their paycheck as well as a potential client or separate employer that significantly influences, controls, or co-determines their working conditions. And in the letter, Cassidy called attention to a potential violation of the Congressional Review Act, which requires a 60-day delay in the implementation of a rule once that rule is published in the Federal Register or received by Congress, whichever comes later. And the next day, on November 16th, the National Labor Relations Board announced an extension of the effective date from the current effective date, slated to be December 26th, to 2 months later, February 26th, citing that the extension of the effective date was being carried out to, quote, facilitate resolution of legal challenges with respect to the rule. Lastly, I did not want to close out this week's rundown without mentioning an important decision from the Fifth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals regarding workers over at Tesla in the Fremont, California plant. Over at Tesla, workers had filed an unfair labor practice charge. A complaint had been issued by the National Labor Relations Board in response to the prohibition by Tesla of employees who wanted to wear UAW supportive t-shirts while on the clock on the shop floor. Tesla says that wearing the shirts was a violation of their team wear policy, which required them to wear company-issued uniforms. The National Labor Relations Board sided with the UAW and with the workers looking to wear those shirts. However, Tesla appealed that decision to the Fifth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals. And this week we received the decision that vacated the board's decision against Tesla. And in the circuit court's decision, they essentially sided with Tesla because they argued that employees were not prohibited from wearing union supportive buttons or insignia or communicating about union organizing, and that just the prohibition against wearing a shirt, which they agreed could be a legitimate advance of Tesla's business interests, was not enough to say that workers were being coerced against their right to support the union or communicate about the union in other forms that were still very much available to them. Quoting from the decision, Judge Jerry Smith says that the teamwear policy or any hypothetical company's uniform policy advances a legitimate interest of the employer and neither discriminates against union communication nor affects non-working time. Meanwhile, the same Fifth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals is set to take on another case involving Tesla, specifically Elon Musk, and a tweet that he had back in 2018 with respect to union organizing, where he said that he did not want to see Tesla employees lose access to their stock options. We'll be watching closely to see if the court sides with Tesla on that matter as well. That'll do it for this week's edition of the Weekly Rundown. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Thanks for watching, and take care.